Hello, welcome to today's webcast, Modernizing for Governments, Charting the Right Course for Digital Transformation. I'm Russ Nichols. I'm a Senior Fellow with the Center for Digital Government, and I'm thrilled to have you here today. I'm thrilled to be acting as the host for today's webcast. Thank you for joining us. I think we're going to have a great session over the next 30 minutes. Before we jump in, let me do a little housekeeping. The webcast is set up to be interactive. If you have questions, because of the short format today, because it's only 30 minutes, we won't have a Q&A session at the end, but go ahead and pop your questions into the Q&A portion of the tool as they come up in the conversation. We'll be watching those and we'll try to incorporate those in the conversation as we go. Any questions we don't get to, and in fact, all of the questions will be handed over to the Trimble team at the end of this, and they'll be able to respond to them directly. So just because there's no official Q&A session at the end, please don't hesitate. Go ahead and put those questions in as we go through. In the tool itself, you can increase and decrease the size of the windows, drag things around, make them a little bigger. If you have any problems, there is a help button, and that can get you to a guide and help you identify how to resolve any problems that might come up. We'll also be recording this session. At the end of the session, all the registrants will receive a link in their email to the session. Please feel free to come back, watch the session again, or share that with your colleagues that might get some utility out of seeing the session. We do recommend that you disable any pop-up blockers and shut down other things that might be impairing your bandwidth. But other than that, we'll go ahead and jump in. I'm excited to get into today's session. As I mentioned, I'm Russ Nichols. I worked about 32 years in California state government across a number of departments, including CAL FIRE and the Department of Corrections. Ultimately, I retired as the Deputy State CIO at the end of 2022. Joining me today, I have two distinguished guests. I have Matt Magruder, who is the Environmental Research Manager for the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District, and Matt Sprague, Industry Strategy Director for Local Government and Utilities for Trimble. So Matt Magruder, can I lean on you for a second if you would introduce yourself in a little more detail for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Russ, and thank you to all the attendees for taking time out of your busy schedules today. So I work for the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. I've been with the district for about 15 years now. I'm currently serving as Environmental Research Manager. So my job at large is to serve the district with research needs. A lot of the work I do doesn't have a playbook for it, and that's why we're starting our digital transformation initiative at MMSD through my department. But as you'll learn, it's a district-wide and very intentional effort to do better with data, and we're excited to share the story with you as we move forward. I'll turn it over to Matthew Sprague to do a little more introduction of himself.
Thank you very much. Yep. So again, Matt Sprague, Industry Strategy Director for Local Government Utilities for Trimble's owner and public sector. I always say that's a mouthful. But yeah, so we have a set of solutions that are designed to address the asset lifecycle management needs of owners of public assets. I've been with Trimble for about 6 years. I live up in which was the lunar eclipse crazy state of New Hampshire last week. We're happy to get everybody back out of our state into a normal traffic pattern here. Yeah, so within Trimble, part of my job is to direct our strategy and how we're going to leverage our solutions and positions our solutions for the betterment of our customers. How can they leverage these things to get the most efficiency and get the most benefit out of it? Most recently, we've been talking about our asset lifecycle management and how the use of solutions combined and connected can positively affect the total cost of ownership for our customers and the assets that they manage. I've had this conversation with Matt Magruder in the offices in Milwaukee, and he was brought into this conversation because they have an entire digital transformation that's going on with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District. And it was super compelling to understand how what we provide is a nugget of what is the overall holistic vision of the district. And what Matt is doing within that, within there is just super compelling, and I'm excited for us to explore it a little bit more today.
All right, thank you, Matt. Well, as we kick this off, government services have traditionally been manual. They've been very person to person. In fact, that was one of the things that was really valued here in California, is a lot of those in-person services. Now, double-edged sword. Some people loved them. Some people really didn't. If you think about going to a DMV, I think that's the case study that everybody everywhere uses as something they never, ever want to have to do. But the reality is some of those services are just better in person, and we're really part of a long-standing culture. But now we've got technology, we've got expectations of our clients, and frankly, the pandemic really forced that issue. We had to take things that had always been person to person and over-the-counter type services and figure out how to digitize them. So really a catalyst for that kind of change. And it changed the expectation. People that didn't want to use technology now have that as an expectation. That's the way they want to do it. I don't personally ever think I need to go back to a DMV office, except maybe once in a great while to take a picture. But even that may go away as we transition in the future. So there are a lot of things that have developed in government, and we're headed down a different path than we used to be. And so I think that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how constituents are changing the way they work with government. So let's move into the first poll. As we set this, we want to take a temperature check for the folks in the audience. Where are you in your digital transformation journey? So there's 4 options there. Just choose the one that is most appropriate for you. We'll give you about 60 seconds to fill that in. But as we jump into this conversation for Matt S. and Matt M., what do you see as changes in expectations of people as they work with governments? And Matt Sprague, maybe we'll start with you real quickly.
So you're asking for the changes from the expectation of the government?
Of the people consuming the government services.
Correct. Yeah. So they want to receive or go through the government services. How do I want to say this? I want to say it faster, right? But it's not always that expectation that it has to happen faster, but I want to say efficiently, right? They don't want to get stuck in a line to find out that the information they have is incomplete and they have to go back and get back in that line or get back on the phone. They want a much more smoother interaction with what they are asking, right? So there's this digital transformation journey that's, let's be realistic. The inefficiencies are on both ends, right? Whenever there is a long line, having to go back at forget about the physical lines. Let's just say it's back and forth in terms of trading emails and whatnot. There's frustration from the applicant or the citizen on one end, but there's frustration on the internal side too, because that's slowing down internal processes. So I think it's all about like how can we do more with less from the business side of it, and how can I be a happier citizen on the other side.
Yeah, I think you alluded to something there, and Matt Magruder, I'm going to ask you to opine on this a little bit. Excuse me. So it's not just taking a paper process and making it electronic, because that introduces some of the same roadblocks, some of the same bottlenecks that we had before. But in your experience in Milwaukee, how have you guys actually dealt with improving those services because you can now have access to technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think fundamentally it comes back to a demand for more transparency in our operations, right? Both that we're being financially responsible and environmentally responsible in our space at Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, right? So there's got to be a business case behind doing things. We're not doing it just because it's cool, because we're trying to improve water quality and health of the environment, right? So when we're doing something as simple as digitization of a form, essentially at the end of the day, there's a full life cycle around the data that's being collected. And ultimately, we want to have reliable information that is accessible to the public as well as our top officials to make data-driven decisions around operational changes and capital improvements to support our organizational goals and objectives. So there's got to be a full life cycle and understanding around why we're doing something, and then we pursue those individual activities on a case-by-case basis. But we were effective and fortunate enough that we have a very progressive information technology services division at the district. So we were able to really mitigate, some of the pains that came with other government sections through COVID by being proactive and embracing digital technology. So we weren't new to Teams and virtual meetings when that happened, but we started to explore other, mechanisms such as, electronic contracting mechanisms to help reduce the amount of time and the cycle time with getting, authorization to do the work we need to do.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Matt. Let's go ahead and pop up the results of the poll and just see where people are. So where are you in your transformation journey? Some folks are still predominantly manual, not very many, very small number there. They've done some digitization out of need because of the pandemic. We've done some and ready to build out a full plan. In other words, they've started the journey and there's more in front of them. And some of them already have a plan and they're headed down. And so Matt Magruder, as you and I talked about this earlier, I think the reality, and I think it's reflected in these numbers, people are a little bit across all of these responses. Any thoughts?
I agree with you. And I would say for our organization, to some extent, we have a complicated operation. We have a contract operator that supports us at MMSD. We've been working in that type of relationship for, going on in 2028, it'll be 30 years of, some form of privatization and supporting our contract operations. So that being said, no matter where you are in your digital maturity level, it's not going to get any easier than today, right? Because the technology is continuing to grow exponentially. The data sets and the volume of data that we come in contact with is just going to get more and more challenging. So I always remind people, today is as easy as it's going to ever be. So I try to encourage people. It's really an exercise in getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And that really starts with having some intentional discussions with where are we today and where do we want to be tomorrow? And then starting to develop some common education and understanding to level the internal organizational playing field around digital. Because one thing that I found in Milwaukee when I started engaging with our organization at large, because it is an organization-wide effort, top down and bottom up, how are we going to make sure we're all on the same page? So coming together with common definitions, business needs for the organization to really develop, a strategy that meets our needs. So right now in our digital transformation journey, we're really in planning phase for it. Again, this is a first time for us at MMSD. We've never done a digital transformation effort before. We've done a lot of ad hoc digital transformation, but really this is about bringing all the players together to make sure that we have a good goal deployment strategy at the organizational level for going after digital. So in and of itself, it creates a framework and a pathway forward for us, but in and of itself, it doesn't solve anything. The rubber really hits the road once we come together with, okay, here's where we are today, where we want to be in the future, and what we need to do to close the gaps. But we really need to make sure we have resources, both financial and human capital, to make sure that we can connect all the loose ends here and make sure we set a firm foundation to be ready and agile as technology continues to progress. For us, we want to do this in a fashion where we're not sacrificing security, right? A lot of us provide critical services and we can't compromise on that. So we're trying to figure out, okay, this might be what's possible, but realistically, we might only be able to get this far. So we're working as an effort across the organization to really explore and push on how far we can go and really what we can afford to do.
Right. I appreciate that. Thank you, Matt. So you mentioned something in the middle of that about having the human resources available to do this. And I think one of the fears when we talk about digital transformation, there's sometimes there's a lack of leadership willing to push it, but a lot of times there's, I think, a gap of understanding of what it really means. People feel like they might be displaced. My job's going to go away. And while it's true that some jobs are impacted, in my experience, what we found is the people are really one of the most important pieces of this. They're the grease that makes this work. The technology can support a lot of these things. It becomes a decision support system, but it's not displacing the people that have to actually own the processes and make the decisions. Is that your experience, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I try to lead and very consistently with every workshop and every milestone we have on the critical path to remind people about what the digital transformation journey is for us at MMSD. And for me, it's always easiest to lead with what it's not. So I always remind people there is no, we have no interest in eliminating the need for people and their knowledge at MMSD. There's not an implication around digital transformation that somebody's not doing something correctly or that inherently doing something wrong. We don't foresee the digital transformation to be a magic bullet, like a specific tool or software that you magically optimize everything. We don't see it coming fast, easy, or cheap, and definitely not being a one size fits all for every organization. So for us, what we really try to remind people is it's a long-term commitment rooted in continuous improvement for our organization. We're trying to develop a mindset and culture that embraces digital innovation, and we want it to be interdepartmental and collaborative. And so it really is going to require people, their buy-in, investment, effort, and patience. So we want to try to lead with a good, strong foot forward in digital transformation. So in our framework development, we really started and broke it into 3 phases. And the first phase of the project was really about education. What's possible with digital? What have others done? And then what are some of the growing pains that have come with it? So that's kind of how we started to get into it, to kind of level the playing field and have that discussion where we can slowly earn the trust of people who are engaging with us, because people are critical to success in digital transformation, like in any initiative for an organization. If people don't buy in, it'll falter.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Matt. Matt Sprague, let's talk a little bit about now you digitize, and part of what we've been talking about is taking this data that used to be, whether it was in file cabinets or on paper or in a spreadsheet or in disparate systems. As you digitize, you bring that information together, you make it into a digital asset. We've kind of referred to that loosely a couple of times. And Matt, I'm wondering if you guys at Trimble, when you're working with your client groups, is that a big focus and part of the business case that folks are talking about, or what's your experience?
So yes, that is a loaded question for me. So I always say when I'm at trade shows giving presentations and whatnot, I normally start with, we don't have a data creation problem. We have a data organization, a data utilization problem. You think about all the different ways that we create that data. And Matt's 100% correct. This is as simple as it's ever going to be. The amount of data that we continue to create will be continue to grow and grow and grow and become more and more complicated. So my belief is that the digital transformation journey needs to start. So it starts with the end in mind. So if you're taking Stephen Covey, who's the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that's like the premise, is start with the end in mind. And so that is like essentially like the perfect like segue into like, how do you start a digital transformation journey? Okay, well, start to think about what is the macro goal of all of this that has the maybe not macro goal, but like the widest span of effect. in terms of being able to harness and leverage and organize all of your data. Like that should be kind of like the kind of overriding theme. And then you have like thousands of different micro efforts that you can go through that is essentially digitizing certain processes. Maybe there's a manual process that becomes just simply, put into electronic means. So there's a benefit there. But I think it's also digital transformation is also, if you think about it, most of our technology, the way that it's utilized, first came from our people and the processes that we historically had, and then we found a technology that fit into that process. And it's not necessarily the most efficient process, but we were, just as anything evolves, right? We were limited into what was there. Nowadays, there's technology that's much more nimble, so that funnel of like how we got there can actually be flipped, right? So now we have this like this plethora of different solutions that are out there, interoperability that now says, okay, let's kind of flip the script a little bit and be like, what should our people in process be, and how we should act based on the nimbleness of that technology. All like, I'm probably only creating even greater confusion amongst the people that are here, but I think that's part of the message is that it's, you start with the end in mind. Like you have to have a North Star that you're pointing towards. Everything that you're doing is helping harness the data, right. Whether it's harnessing it in a micro scale or in a macro scale. In the macro scale, an example would be, all organizations have a CapEx side and an OpEx side. And from an executive's chair, standing desk, whatever they utilize, if you said to them, hey, we can provide you a single pane of glass that you can see the health of both your capital expenditures as well as your operational expenditures all at once, that they'll probably do a cartwheel and a backflip in being able to see that in a single manner, as opposed to today's basis is they will get reports that are maybe at best 3 months in the past to say, this is what it was 3 months ago, this is what it was 3 months ago. So starting with the end in mind, really leveraging the data, how it's going to work best for your organization in the future, and then you start to make minor improvements as you drive towards that.
Right. Thanks, Matt. And we'll decompose that a little bit more as we get into some of the planning process. But one thought that draws to mind is as you start with that end, it's the end for whom is the question that comes to mind. And I think that'll be different for different organizations. For a government organization that directly serves the public, a DMV, a job services type organization, they've got people on the outside that have expectations. A lot of government organizations are serving maybe if they're a control agency that works just specifically with other government organizations, their clients are different. And some of the stakeholders are internal, if improving the essentially quality of life for the employees who are going through this, getting them to actually work not just on the mundane question. If somebody comes into a counter, for example, you'll have 10 people in a row ask the same question. How do they automate that process so that they can actually deal on the more significant problems and actually use their skills to address deeper and harder problems? So a lot of that comes in, and identifying that kind of stuff up front, to your point, what is that desired outcome? What is the win at the end is very important. So let's peel back the planning process a little bit as we start to approach a digital transformation. And Matt Magruder, maybe I'll ask you to start here. If an organization wants to head down this path, what are some of the things in your experience that organizations need to look at? Is there a roadmap that you used, or did you do something just based on the specific needs in front of your organization?
So yeah, I'll definitely try to do my best to answer that concisely, and also try to bake in some of the questions that I've been seeing come into the chat in the response. There was a component about, how do you get buy-in for this, right? So we did need to get an executive sponsor. I was fortunate enough to get our executive director to support us with this, and then also I have our technical services director working very closely and helping steer this initiative within the organization. So we have very high levels of leadership supporting it. And really, ultimately, we developed boundaries. So our digital transformation framework is focused on our water resource recovery facilities, collection system. So it's not right now an enterprise-wide focus, though we have enterprise digital transformation ongoing. But in those boundaries, we develop things like reducing costs and eliminating waste at the organization, improving reliability and reduced risk of failure, improved performance, and increased innovation. And there's specific definitions and metrics that we can measure to kind of show the benefit of doing this work right. There are skeptics. It is a new initiative. People will say, hey, we've never done this before. Why do we have to do it now? But, I think whether it's a demonstration of a cost of poor quality or a cost of quality, that's another way to kind of spin the business case and develop a little bit of internal buy-in for it. If there's a way to reduce pain points for people and processes, cycle time on getting certain types of paperwork through a chain of command, those are all things that can be explored and for the benefit of our customers, our ratepayers in Milwaukee. So those are the type of things we're looking at. It's not doing it just because we can do it. It's because it helps us improve the outcomes that are most important for the people that we serve.
All right, perfect. Thank you. As it relates to the planning process, Matt Sprague, in your experience, what are some of the areas that folks need to focus on as they do this? We all talk about on-prem versus cloud and things along those lines. What are some of the other areas that come to mind for you?
So I think it's something that Matt made mention to earlier too. So, and there is a direct tangential connection there with on-prem versus cloud, and that's the cybersecurity element of everything. So, looking towards the future, just as similar in terms of the amount of data is going to continue to grow. I think the online threats are going to continue to grow. So, having a cybersecurity goal, plan, process put in place to try to drive that will be super important. And I think the most prominent one to begin with is the on-prem versus cloud, right? And the value, the data security value. And forget about the internal cost savings and management value behind it, but just the cybersecurity side of it, super important to make sure that that's part of the plan.
Sure. I think in my experience, one of the things that's important as you start to flesh that plan out is looking at things, cybersecurity, you mentioned what type of data. Is it HIPAA data, for example? Do you have additional security requirements? Does it need to be in a FedRAMP instance? If it doesn't need to be FedRAMP level, you can save some money by not placing it in that type of an environment. So things along those lines. And then we had a question about how do you set priorities and identifying the right coalition for the organization to set those priorities. Which piece comes first? Which ones are the highest value? Which ones are the easiest to achieve? Maybe lowest investment for biggest bang. How you set those priorities, I think that's going to be different for different organizations going forward. So,
and I think the most important part, Russ, is internal alignment, right? There'll be one organization that says this is our priority, another one that this is priority.
Absolutely.
But, so internal to your organization, if someone makes that decision in a silo, you will have problems, right? It's less of a technology thing. It's purely just like a change management process to make sure that you get the right stakeholders involved, and everybody makes that decision and are ready to row in the same direction.
Yeah, I think if I had to boil that down, I would say that these digital transformations, they are not technology projects. It's digital transformation of the business, and everybody needs to be looking at it from that perspective. So with that, we've come to the end of our time. I really want to thank Matt Magruder and Matt Sprague for joining us today, sharing your expertise. And I want to thank Trimble for making today's sessions possible. I also want to thank everybody that spent a little bit of time with us this morning. We didn't get to all of the questions. 30 minutes goes by really fast. So we'll provide those questions to Matt and his organization, and they will be able to respond and connect with you directly and provide you some feedback on those. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you join us on another webinar in the future. And until then, have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Russ. And thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.